Hello everybody, welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia and today it is time once again for Friday Reads on Friday, September the 26th. So just a few days left of September. I did my October TBR earlier this week and we're coming into the final home stretch of September. I have a few really good books to talk about that I read over the past week and I have a few days left to read a couple more. In TV news, what are we watching? Slow Horses started last night, so I'm glad that's back on. The baking show continues, which is probably my favorite event of the year is when the Great British Baking Show starts up again. It's just this brief and wonderful interlude, and it really came at a great time when we needed something good and positive to watch. And I got a piece of bookish mail yesterday. I'm going to hold up the back side of this so I don't reveal my address and have to re-edit my video like I did in a previous video. It's my Deep Vellum subscription. Since it came yesterday, I was able to withhold opening it until today. So I'm going to open that. Well, why not right now? Let's see what's in there. I was going to say at the end when I talk about what I'm going to read next, but I think right this very second, my willpower ran out. So let's open this package. Wilkie's come in to see too. He's down here very curious about the package. What is it? Daniela Tarazona, The Animal on the Rock, translated by Lizzie Davis and Kevin Jerry Dunn. I have no clue what this is, but look how pretty this is. I love green and pink. These are two of my favorite colors together. Deep Vellum is the #1 publisher of translated to English fiction in the US. But the first few books they've sent me, they've been very diverse, but written in English. So I was wondering when I would actually get a translated book, and here it is. Okay, so this is a Mexican author. Let's read the description. After Irma's mother dies, she boards a plane to the coast. Soon she is consumed by strange dreams and irrational fears, and her body begins to transform in ways as unexpected as they are natural. The skin over her joints grows thick and scaly, her eyes take on a yellow gleam, and the border between reality and delirium becomes first elastic, then irrelevant. As the world around her tips out of balance, the weather turning volatile, strangers issuing cryptic warnings, she returns again and again to the rock where she undergoes metamorphosis, a series of radical mutations that enable her to survive. Oh my gosh, this sounds weird. Elemental and prophetic, intimate and universal, The Animal on the Rock bears witness to the terror and magnificence of being a child, a parent, a changing animal. A profoundly biological and introspective novel that lies somewhere between clinical record and fever dream. Wow, well this has got creepy October vibes for days. Kind of makes me think of Our Wives Under the Sea, how the woman came back from the underwater mission and she's just sort of transforming and wanting to be in the water, and she's kind of turning possibly aquatic. I am very intrigued. I like the way it looks. I like the way it sounds. It's something I never heard of. I'll get back to you. Eventually I'll do a haul. I might bring it back in again and then put in some author pieces. Let's talk about what I actually read this week. The first one that I finished was one of the books for the science fiction double feature project that I'm doing on Discord, which is part of my 60 before 60 project. 30 of the books are speculative and 30 are rereads. And so there's a Discord set up for the speculative fiction. And one of them for September was The Membranes by Ta-Wei. The translator is Larissa Heinrich. I talked about this a little bit last week, I think, when I was starting it. I really loved this. It was so strange. I'll talk about weird body stuff. This one, it's not really body horror, but there's some strange things about the human body, artificial parts and cyborgs and androids, and there's just some weird stuff in here, but I really loved it. It's kind of hard to explain. So in the future, everybody lives underwater in like underwater domes. The Earth's been trashed. There is still stuff up on the Earth. You got to wear tons of hazmat type protection because the ozone layer is so busted that people have started dying of skin cancer. That's what drove everybody under the sea. And the main character is Momo, who is a dermal care technician. Skincare is really important. Wealthy and elite people spend a lot of money on special skincare and massages, and she is kind of a skincare specialist to the celebrities of this culture. She's estranged from her mother that she has not spent time with in 20 years. She's now 30. When she was a child, she was very ill with a chronic illness and spent several years in the hospital. And after she recovered, she went off to a boarding school and learned her craft, and she distanced herself from her mother, who's the CEO of a major corporation. And at the beginning of the book, her mother has contacted her and said she really wants to see her. Her birthday is coming up, and she'd like to get back in touch. So we find out Momo's wondering, well, what's her mom's agenda? Her mom's always got, she probably wants something. What's going on? And we learn little bits and pieces about Momo's backstory and her childhood. I am really big on avoiding spoilers, and I don't even like spoilers. To me, it's almost a spoiler if you allude too much about things coming up later in a book or give any kind of hints or wink winks or anything like that. So I'm going to avoid any and all that, but just to say it's not a predictable book. There are certain science fiction themes that I have read in other books, certain concerns about the climate, the environment, about AI and our association with technology and the future of medical technology. There's things like that have been talked about in other books, but this actual plot and what happens with these characters, I did not find it predictable whatsoever. Lots of questions are raised that you think as you read, you think, is this one of those really weird books where none of the questions will be answered? No. Actually, I got answers to most of my questions, but they weren't the answers I was expecting. And I really loved that. And it was written in 1996, but it doesn't feel technologically dated. It still feels pretty contemporary to me. Next book that I finished was How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accent by Julia Alvarez. And I read this for Mariandrea's project, Books and Bocadillos, where she has a different book by a Latinx author every month of the year. And this was one that I have never read, but I've always heard about, and I really enjoyed it. It's the story of a family from the Dominican Republic that have 4 daughters, and they have to move to the U.S. after the father had some kind of role or support or participation in the attempted overthrow of a dictator, Rafael Trujillo. So in early 1960s, they moved to New York City. The family already had some back and forth movement with the city. The mom had gone to school in the States as a young woman. And the father is a doctor, but he has struggles for a period of time before he can work in his field in the United States after they move. So they go from relative luxury in the Dominican Republic in a beautiful home that's on kind of a compound with their relatives, lots of domestic workers in and around their home. And then they go to New York and they're in a cramped apartment, low on money, trying to make ends meet. And so it's about the 4 girls growing up, and this kind of tension in the family between acclimating and becoming more American versus keeping their Dominican values, and their parents being pretty traditional. They're traditional, but then they put them in this new setting, and there's just this tension and push and pull all the time. And the plot is interesting because it goes back and forth in time. It moves around, and there's stories told about and by different sisters, and sometimes it's about a group family situation, sometimes it's just about one sister. It could be something that happened in her childhood, something that happened in her adulthood. There's a pretty big time span, but it moves all around back and forth. Sometimes they're back in the Dominican Republic before they ever moved, or when they go back during the summers, because the parents send the girls back to spend the whole summer every year, much to their chagrin. And because they don't want them to lose their language and their traditions and their values and culture. And the girls are constantly trying to push the boundaries and bypass all of their parents' traditional gatekeeping attempts on their behavior. That's what the story is about. It's funny at times and rather touching or sad or traumatic at other times. Just kind of a good family saga, and I'm really glad that I finally read the book. The other literary work that I finished this week was As You Like It, or did I finish it last week? Did I talk about that last time? I read As You Like It by William Shakespeare. It was a romp. It's a kind of a rollicking Shakespeare story, and it has a lot of elements that appear in other stories, but it's a fun one. There's people that are exiled and a whole bunch of various people wandering around in the woods, women in drag, and love stories and missed connections and rediscovered connections, weddings at the end, and all that kind of stuff. So it's not particularly rich fare, but it was a good time to read. I know I'm not saying very much about it. I'm pretty sure I must have read this last week because, and okay, here's the thing. I do not do well notes and memory wise with e-versions of books, and I'm reading more of them now for accessibility and flexibility. I have all the Shakespeare in a book, but it's so enormous and heavy that it's really cumbersome to sit and read it with the weight of it and the super thin pages. So I have begun downloading free versions of these plays and reading them that way. I can come in and out, I can change the size, all this kind of stuff. But then I don't have my notes, and then I forget what I was going to say by the time it's time to talk about it. So, and that happens to me with every ebook. It's an okay format, but it's not my favorite format. So that's my disclaimer for why I don't have a whole lot of content and comments on the Shakespeare play. But I did have a fun reading it. Okay, moving on to what I am currently reading, which is something that is so exquisitely beautiful and good, and I'm loving it. And what the hell, Booker Committee? Because Seascraper. This is so good. It is by Benjamin Wood. I've never read anything else by Benjamin Wood. I looked up Benjamin Wood, and his previous book was 600 pages long, but look at this. So that was an intriguing little factoid. If you've read anything else by Benjamin Wood that you would recommend, shoot me a comment. Hopefully, maybe, does he have a really good one that's not like 600 or 700 pages long? But Seascraper, I love this. I'm halfway through. It's a quiet gem, and I'll talk more about it when I've actually finished it, but it will be in my list of quiet gems, and maybe it'll be in my top 10. I don't know. I can't really tell halfway through, but I'm really loving it. It's about a young man named Thomas Flett, who is 20 years old and lives with his mother on the English coast. The town is Long Ferry, little bitty town. It's early 1960s. The date isn't given right out, but you can date it by some things that are happening in the story and movies referred to that are showing at the theater and things like that. So it has to be at least 1962 because the theater in a nearby town is playing Lawrence of Arabia. And Thomas is a shrimper. He goes out every day and fishes for shrimp in the old-fashioned way with nets and a horse, and other shrimpers have moved up to using motorized equipment and things, but he's still doing it in the way that his grandfather taught him. We find out that Thomas's mother had him very young at 15 or 16, and that his father was a teacher, his mother's teacher. And due to the time they're living in, the teacher's not the one vilified for this event, it's Thomas's mother. So she's ostracized and cut off from her other relatives and the community. They don't have much to do with her except some men that she dates. And he was raised by his grandfather and mother. Thomas is a thoughtful young man who loves to read. He also is secretly a musician and practices guitar and singing. He keeps his guitar out hidden in the shed because he thinks also that his mother will ridicule him or think that he's wasting time when he could be trying to earn some more money for their keep. And the beginning of the book, it reminded me of Small Things Like These in a couple of ways. One, because of the small town that's difficult to place in time and seems like it's further back in time than it actually is. And also the detail that is given to Thomas's daily routine, which is like Bill Furlong and Small Things Like These. When we get all the details of his day delivering the coal, we get Thomas's all the steps he goes through with his horse and collecting the shrimp, and then just the being out in the bog and the rain and the stink and always being cold and wet and dirty and smelly, and how his body feels like a much older man. And his mother is described, if you didn't work out the math that she's only 35 years old, you would think that she was a much older woman. And so just we know that their daily life is harsh. He has a few pleasures. He has a crush on his best friend's sister. He's trying to work up his nerve to play his guitar and sing down at the pub. Then this man shows up. This guy, this movie director, rolls into town. He has seen Thomas out on the beach, and he wants to hire him to be sort of a local guide and assistant with this beach footage that he wants to film for this movie. And he's got a lot of talk and a lot of flash, and he's offering a lot of money for Thomas to do this job. And it starts to open up a window in Thomas's mind about other possibilities, other places, other ways to live. And he is not naive or gullible. He's pretty skeptical about this guy. So we'll see what happens. But I am loving the feel of it, the language of it, the detail. I feel it is so tangible. I feel like I'm there. I don't know what that committee was playing at, but Seascraper, I don't care, because I'm reading Seascraper, and so I will not be deprived of the joy of having read it, whether or not whatever list it's on. So I'm loving it, and I will have more to say probably after I actually have finished it. And then I am also reading, this is my selection for Framed, the event in September about reading books about art. I'm right at the end. I only have 1 or 2 chapters left of All the Beauty in the World. And I love this book too. So this is a memoir by Patrick Bringley, who rather unbelievably got a job at the New Yorker right out of college. And it's kind of a flashy job where he's driving around and he's putting together author events. So he's picking up Stephen King at the airport. During the same period, he's very young, right out of college, and his brother, Tom, who's just a couple years older than him, has cancer. And Tom is a graduate student. He's just gotten married. And over the course of a few years, while Thomas is starting out in his adult life, Thomas is, but also Patrick, Thomas becomes ill and eventually he does die. And when this is happening, Patrick realizes that he needs to leave this job. Whether or not that would have happened without the stress and the grief of losing Tom, it's unclear, but he does resign from that job, and he takes a job as a guard at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And he's thinking about quietude and slowness and thoughtfulness and just stepping out of the clamor of this other world. And he does get that, but he gets a lot more. And it kind of reminded me of the book A Month in the Country, which is a fiction book, but the man in that book thinks that he's going to find quiet and solitude and just him and that painting on the scaffold when he leaves and takes the job in the countryside. Well, Patrick I think he thinks that a little bit too, but he ends up working at the museum for 10 years. And so the book, he does chronicle his family story, and you can feel the intense loss of his brother passing, and his brother who was so bright. But most of it's about the museum. It's about Patrick's relationship with other guards, the friendships that he forms, the deep connections that he makes with the artwork by standing in their presence for hours and hours every day, and anecdotal interactions he has with visitors to the museum that are just wonderful for the most part. There was a part in here at the beginning that made me think of another book I'd read recently, where he says, frequently people say, is it really hard to stand there all day? And he said, perhaps I have Stockholm Syndrome, but I feel that I've surrendered to the turtleish movement of a watchman's time. I can't spend the time, I can't fill it or kill it or fritter it into smaller bits. What might be excruciating if suffered for an hour or two is oddly easy to bear in large doses. Mostly, I don't have my eye on the finish line. I've adjusted to a life that feels deeply old-fashioned, aristocratic even, where hours are idled away with princely detachment for a modest hourly wage. And I feel like it both reminds me, but it's a comparison and a contrast to the book Standing Heavy by Gauze, a French book by an author from the Ivory Coast who chronicles the experiences of security guards in Paris who have come from Cote d'Ivoire. Oh, I said it right that time. I just try to say it in French and it comes out wrong. And just that quotidian tedium of standing. And in that book, he says, well, you either have to be able to empty out your mind altogether, or you have to have a really busy interior mind. Now, they don't have the presence of the fabulous artwork to absorb them. They're security guards, so they're watching for shoplifters and things. But he does talk about that aspect of adjusting your mentality to the fact that your body is not moving and is standing in one position all day. But he just goes on. I've marked lots of nuggets in here. And he talks about the value of seeing the same works again and again and again. And he says, with experience, I'm coming to know that some works of art reward long looking while others give back less. And you often can't guess at the outset which will be which. And he's talking about a particular sculpture that has intrigued him. There's reflections like this all throughout the book about what his time spent there has brought to him through the artwork, but also through the people and this really wonderful, diverse group of people that work at the museum, and the way that guard job operates and the way the Met operates, and little bits of history and even history of thefts from the Met. And there's just so much good stuff. And what really made it even better, I showed this last week and I've showed it before when I received the gift, but this Met guide that my friend Michael sent me, and almost every work that Patrick talks about in the book is in here. So even though he does have a guide at the end about finding the pieces online if you want to look at them, it's really great to have it right in my lap and be able to look. When he's talking about a day spent in a certain hall of the museum, I can look at that section in the book and I see the pieces that he is mentioning, and I can picture him and the museum guests, and it has really enhanced my experience. And it's just, the book's beautiful too. And it makes me want to go on a trip to New York and go to the Met also, of course. But it's just a lot more than just a grief memoir. It's a very accessible book about art as well, and I really have enjoyed it. So that brings us up to what is next. I think I'm going to be finishing both of those books tonight. Maybe Seascraper might roll over a little bit into tomorrow, but pretty much I have a few days left of September. Am I going to finish all of these books that I pulled out and said I was going to read in September? No, I shall not. There will be a rollover or a come back to it later. I do have 2 books kind of eyeballed to read during these last few days. One of them is from my September TBR, and that is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. And this was a book I have earmarked that I wanted to reread as part of my 60 before 60, the rereading wing of my project. I read it a few years ago. It was the first James Baldwin book I read, and then I have been reading other things by him over the past 2 or 3 years, but I wanted to circle back to Giovanni's Room and read it again. It's a shorty for Shorty September, So I think I can squeeze it in. And it is the story of a young man named David, and he is finding obstacles. Some are societal obstacles, and some are just his own personal obstacles, in acknowledging his feelings and his sexuality when he has a short but very intense love affair with a bartender named Giovanni. The consequences that ensue. And that's all I'm going to say about the plot. But it is a beautiful and sad story. And then the other book that I think I'm going to wedge into these final days was not on the TBR. It's a book that I've been in a long line for on Libby, but it popped up in print at my library. When I first was looking for it, my library didn't have it. But while I've been waiting for weeks and weeks and weeks, they acquired it. And there it was on the shelf, like, oh. Does that ever happen? You go to the library and a book you didn't even know they were going to acquire, it's right there on the new release. And you just have to rearrange and fit it in. And it's the original by Nell Stevens. I originally wanted to read the original for Framed in September, but I wasn't going to be able to get to it in time because it's about an art forger. And it just sounded it just sounded really good. The short description is, in a grand English country house in 1899, an aspiring art forger must unravel whether the man claiming to be her long-lost cousin is an imposter. There's a very long description, but I read through it and I'm going to sum it up. So there's this young woman. She's been raised on her uncle's estate, and it's like a declining household. And she has developed skills as a forger, but maybe the family doesn't really know this, and so she's secretly making art reproductions and squirreling away money to make a big escape. And then a cousin shows up, but maybe he's not a cousin, and I don't know, is he trying to claim the fortune or something? When Charles returns, Grace's aunt welcomes him with open arms, yet fractures appear in the household. Some believe he is who he is, others are convinced he's an imposter. Grace must decide what she believes and what she is willing to risk. So there's different kinds of fraud and forgery abounding. Have you read this? Anybody read this? Tell me what you think. It's been a pretty good week. Let me know what's going on with you, and I will be checking in with you later. I think we're going to try to go downtown this afternoon to this bakery that makes the best sourdough I've ever had in my entire life. And they do have a dog-friendly patio, but the weather is not friendly for any living creature because it's still in the 90s. So help. The iced pumpkin spice iced tea trend will continue, maybe forever. But take care, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.